For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. When we're talking about the biggest free agent busts in the history of the Detroit Lions franchise, the list starts and ends with this man right here, quarterback Scott Mitchell. Is he the biggest free agent bust in the history of the NFL? Absolutely not, especially when guys like Nick Foles and Albert Haynesworth exist. He had at least one good season under his belt in 1995, where he threw for 4,338 yards and 32 touchdowns, finishing the year with the second most passing yards and the third most passing touchdowns in the league. And he at least guided the Lions to the postseason in 1995. As a side note, to learn more about one of those wins that helped get Detroit to the playoffs that year, a blowout victory against the expansion Jacksonville Jaguars, click the card in the upper right corner. However, his Lion tenure was largely disappointing and incredibly underwhelming, especially because Detroit gave him the second largest signing bonus in NFL history at the time. Take out the 1995 season, and for the mid to latter half of the 1990s, Scott Mitchell was one of the worst starting quarterbacks in football. If you want what feels in many ways like the 90s equivalent of Mitch Trubisky in terms of high expectations, one really good season where he was responsible for guiding his team to the playoffs against all odds, and nothing but crap besides that, it's Scott Mitchell. Heck, even the passing yardage numbers are almost identical. Mitchell had 12,647 yards in Detroit, and Trubisky had 12,536 yards in his career as of this video. I didn't even plan for that when I made that comparison. The numbers are almost identical. Speaking of numbers, we are so close to hitting that number 60,000, as in 60,000 subscribers on the channel. So be sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a moment of the action when we do post a video, because we post videos all the time about all things NFL history, and we're trying to build the best football community on the platform to talk about the great history of this great game. Thanks in advance for your support. But if there's any incident that truly sums up just how bad this man right here was, and if there's any incident that exemplifies the disastrous reign of terror for Scott Mitchell in Detroit, it was the regular season finale of the 1996 season. We'll get to it in a bit, but 1996 was not a good year for Detroit in so many ways, and the season ended with a huge whimper thanks to their quarterback, which isn't surprising, seeing what the quarterback said before the final game of the year. Because for most teams, the quarterback is the leader of the team and the heartbeat of the organization. The team goes where he goes. If you can rally behind your quarterback, you can play good football. If your quarterback is showing a ton of heart and leaving it all out there, it inspires you to do the same, and it picks up the rest of the team. And conversely, if your quarterback is Scott freaking Mitchell, and he's giving up and admitting defeat, you feel the exact opposite. To the point where Lomas Brown may have actually had a point. Because this is the story behind the Lions' regular season finale in 1996 against the San Francisco 49ers. And what might be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest moment of Scott Mitchell's entire NFL career, which is saying a lot. This is the story behind the least motivated team in NFL history. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and how stupid it was, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand and how this season for the Lions was going. It's December 23rd, 1996. It's the final day of the season, quite literally, seeing as this game was on Monday Night Football, and we've got a battle on our hands over a 3-com park in San Francisco between the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. Sometimes, you struggle with these Monday night matchups at the very end of the season, where the game meant a ton on paper. You had the 1989 game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Minnesota Vikings, where the winner would advance to the playoffs, and the loser would be eliminated. You had the 1986 game between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins, where the Patriots would win the division with a win, and would be out of the playoffs with a loss, sending the Cincinnati Bengals through instead. And you had the 1984 game between the Miami Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys, where the Cowboys would be in the playoffs with a win and would be out with a loss, sending the New York Giants through instead. You can learn more about that scenario by clicking the card in the upper right corner. This, however, was not one of those games. For every great season finale on Monday Night Football, where the NFL was banking on a game with huge playoff implications, you had about 4 duds, and this was one of them. The San Francisco 49ers had nothing to play for from a standings perspective, but not because they had a bad season or anything like that. The 49ers entered this game with an 11-4 record and had a top 5 defense and a top 5 offense in the NFL. They were really good. However, the Niners were locked into the number 4 seed and a wild card, regardless of whether they won or lost the game. Seeing as even if they got to 12-4 and tied the Carolina Panthers atop the NFC West, they would not own the tiebreaker over Carolina, seeing as Carolina swept San Francisco during the regular season. And for the Detroit Lions, well, they didn't have to worry about the playoffs because they stunk. Plain and simple, the Lions absolutely stunk that season. 1996 actually started off all right for Detroit, as through their first 6 games, they were 4-2. If you go back to the end of the regular season in 1995, this was a Detroit team that quite possibly, if the cards fell their way, looked like a serious contender to win the Super Bowl, as they had won 11 of their last 13 games. But after that 4-2 start, yeah, everything fell apart, because by this point in the season, heading into the 49ers game, everything that could have gone wrong for Detroit did. Detroit entered this game with an abysmal 5-10 record, having dropped 8 of their last 9 games, and having just lost the game by 28 points to the eventual Super Bowl champion Green Bay Packers. With 1 game to go in the season, the Lions were probably the coldest team in football. Let's bring out the graph to show just what I mean. Through the first 6 weeks of the season, the Lions had a point differential of plus 54, which was the 3rd best in football, only behind the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers. With 1 week to go in the season, their point differential was minus 56. That means that from the time of their 4-2 start to their 5-10 downfall, their point differential was minus 110. Over the course of those 10 weeks, that gave them the worst point differential in football, and the worst change in point differential across the entire league, to the point where they were the only team to have their point differential go down by a triple-digit margin. It was that bad. Their bar is towering underneath everyone else. And you can point to a ton of games as being issues, from the 37-21 loss to the Oakland Raiders, where they trailed 34-0 at one point, to the 35-7 loss to the New York Giants, where they turned the ball over a whopping 6 times and allowed 2 pick sixes, to the infamous 28-24 loss against the Kansas City Chiefs on Thanksgiving, where head coach Wayne Fontes displayed some absolutely inept coaching that will 100% be a dumb decisions episode at some point. But no matter how you want to slice it, the Lions were entering their game against the 49ers with nothing to play for but pride. No matter what they did, they could not make the playoffs like they did in 1995. No matter what they did, heads were going to roll in some capacity. However, when it came to this game right here on Monday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers, there was still some stuff to play for, even if it doesn't show up in the standings. At the end of the day, you're a professional. You're contracted for 16 games, and it's your job to play all 16 of them to the best of your abilities. You're playing for pride. You're playing in front of a national television audience, so you have a chance to expose yourself on the biggest stage in football, because Monday Night Football was still near its peak in ratings dominance back then, even if it was starting to show some signs of decline by this point. You're playing to pull off an upset, seeing as the Niners were 12.5-point favorites. You're playing to potentially get sponsors who are impressed by the performance. You're playing to hit certain contract incentives and bonuses. You're playing for future contracts. You're playing to play spoiler and end the season on a high note. You're playing for your job for the following season. You get the idea. There are probably a ton of reasons why you play the game and are going to try to the best of your abilities, and why you're going to take the game seriously. Does this game mean anything in terms of the playoff picture? No, but then again, That pickup basketball game you play against random strangers at the gym doesn't mean anything, and yet, you still want to look good and try your best and perform well. So, heading into that game against the 49ers, the press asked Scott Mitchell after a horrible season what there was to play for. And you figure that this is a garbage question that is going to get a super generic answer. You'd get something about playing for pride, and playing to end the season on a high note, and playing because for a lot of these guys, this is the last time they'll ever play in a competitive game. Or this is the last time we'll all play a game together, so we want to play for them. You know the drill with answers like this. And if that was what Scott Mitchell said for this game right here, then let's be honest. This is a complete and utter non-story. And there is no way that I'm talking about this nearly 3 decades later. However, as you might have been able to guess, Scott Mitchell did not say that. In fact, he didn't say anything even remotely close to that. Because when Scott Mitchell was asked about what Detroit is playing for, the multi-million-dollar man consulted the magic conch from SpongeBob. Because his answer was this.
Nothing.
The shell has spoken!
Seriously, nothing. And this isn't me exaggerating or taking anything he said out of context. He literally said that the team is playing for nothing. As he said, besides nothing, your whole focus is on getting into the playoffs and having a shot to go to the Super Bowl. And when that doesn't happen, there's really not a whole lot left. I mean, a statement like that is absolutely asinine and disrespectful for a ton of reasons. Number one, wait to respect the fans and the other players on your team, especially as the leader. You're telling me that you don't want to play the game? You're telling me that there's nothing, not one thing that you're playing for? Not even a matter of personal pride, or because some kid who stuck with you through thick and thin this season only gets one more chance to watch their team play for another 8 or 9 months? Not even a matter of helping out your teammates? Not even a selfish reason about monetary incentives? Not even a matter of knowing that Wayne Fontes is likely getting fired at the end of the season right after the game, so you want to rally around your coach and your teammates? Nothing? And seeing as the Lions were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs for the past few weeks, and Lion fans actually paid good money to watch their team play at the Silverdome, and took time out of their day to watch the team, you just wasted their time by saying that they cared more about the game than you did? I mean, an answer like this is absolutely outrageous and absolutely disgusting. Yes, in terms of the playoff picture, you're playing for nothing, but this is the kind of guy that has to be coddled and see the end reward and end goal right in front of him for him to be motivated to do anything. And I should note that head coach Wayne Fontes basically criticized Mitchell for his comments, and he just laid into his quarterback. As Fontes said before the game, you guys have peers in the NFL. Don't go out there and lay down. That was his message. I don't think Scott Mitchell got the memo based on his despicable comments. So considering the fact that the starting quarterback of the team was not motivated in the slightest bit to play in this game, did not want to play this game, and considering the fact that he literally admitted that there was nothing to play for, just spitting in the face of everyone in the organization and associated with the organization in the process, it's going to come as no surprise that this completely unmotivated team did not put up much of a fight, as you probably been able to tell from all of these lowlights you've been watching. When all was said and done, the San Francisco 49ers won the game by a final score of 24-14. And it could have been worse than that if the Niners didn't yank their starters in the second half because they had their seating locked up. And it could have been worse than that if the Niners didn't take a knee at the end of the game deep in Detroit's red zone. Mitchell, the highly motivated man that he was the weakest link, once again letting his teammates down, which should not come as a surprise because he admitted that he was playing for nothing. He finished the game with 88 net passing yards and a fumble. 88 net passing yards. Considering the fact that the Lions attempted 30 passes on the day, this meant that Mitchell averaged less than 3 yards per passing play. I don't need to tell you that's awful. You already know that. It was another ugly loss and an ugly season for Detroit. But if it's any solace for Lions fans, at least you knew that the players couldn't care less about the game. As for what happened to the man who played for this team behind me right here, Scott Mitchell lasted with the Detroit Lions until the end of the 1998 season, much to the dismay of Lions fans everywhere. 2 years too long in a lot of eyes. Anyways, afterwards, Mitchell was on the Baltimore Ravens in 1999, where he also managed to tick off Ravens fans by wearing the number of Johnny Unitas, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. It seemed as though Scott Mitchell had the anti-Midas touch. Everywhere he went, he turned to crap, and the fans hated him. There are many reasons why people don't consider Scott Mitchell to be a good quarterback. And considering the comments that he made against the 49ers in 1996, I can't exactly blame the fans for thinking that way. Look, are some games more important than others? Of course. No one in their right mind is suggesting otherwise. The Super Bowl is more important than a Week 2 regular season game. A winning game is more important than a game during the final week of the season where your playoff scenario cannot change, win or lose. In college football, if you're Ohio State, a random non-conference game is not as important as beating Michigan. But that doesn't mean, especially as a professional in the National Football League, that you give anything less than your best. And that doesn't mean that games mean nothing. There is always a reason to do something, and especially when you are getting paid in a team environment with people relying on you, no game means literally nothing, especially when you are the leader of the team, and the team goes where you go. And I don't think Scott Mitchell got the memo and respected the game during this game right here in 1996 against the 49ers. Because to end that season, for Scott Mitchell on the final game of the year, MNF didn't stand for Monday Night Football. It stood for Means Nothing Football. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.